Her decision will be just as good now.
All right.
Just water, please.
She was in the bathroom, but she left. And I don't know where she went. Good story, Lauren.
All right, well.
Disease, environment, this con, and then how to go. I'm not really fast enough to read any cuts quickly. I might read one. All right. Third world shift argument. A subpoint is conceding a small, large distinction. The factory farms in the U.S. are large and lead to confinement, which is the internal link disease. Small farms do not do that. That's all of our solvency evidence conceded. B subpoint is he's extending this animal-to-animal contact argument. Our argument is that animal-to-animal contact leads to animal-to-human contact, which leads to mutations, which allow transmission from animal to humans. All of this evidence does not assume that distinction, and their drug internal link does also not assume that distinction. Even if he wins that some diseases are not treatable, the drugs we use to treat old diseases become ineffective, which means that even diseases that are treatable now become untreatable in the future, which means we still access internal link. His hospital's argument is stupid. If the medicines don't work and the hospitals don't work, which means we get a stronger internal link. He says organic farming, but this is counterintuitive. It is the natural order of things, and we have better, more qualified evidence on solvency. This is the only comparative evidence in the question of runoff. And factory farms have a bigger magnitude of runoff because they have thousands of animals in a small space, whereas organic farms do not. All of his confinement arguments probably linked to the K, but I'm probably not going to be able to go for that argument. I'd just like to point out his mutations argument. He's conceding a long-term versus short-term distinction, extend the permutation on the CAFO, and even if we surveil diseases, we can't do anything about them if our medications don't work, which means it doesn't solve the internal link to the advantage. He's extending this Kalamazoo evidence and conceding it's not qualified environment. He says grain and feeding, and well, first he makes the court's arguments, but he's conceding those are from a long time ago, they're not enforced, and even if they were enforced as subsidies, means that they have an incentive to violate the laws. Additionally, he's conceding that individuals, that all of his court arguments are stupid. Subsidizing CAFOs indirectly subsidizes corn because it allows permits to buy cheap feed, which means that we solve the internal link. He's extending his biofuels arguments is stupid. It's not specific to the Gulf, and it's also not specific to the Ogallala aquifer. He's not in the, our internal links are simply better to nitrogen runoff because they're talking about things like grain farming and manure, whereas biofuels have not yet taken off, and there's not very many people investing in them. And we can solve their warming arguments. All of our evidence indicates that blooms harm the water, which lead to algae, which leads to CO2, which means that we control the internal link, which solves natural disasters, which means we solve their floods argument. Additionally, all of our resiliency arguments assume things like natural floods. It's not assume things like artificial farming and this kind of top extent. And the impact calculus is silly. They're not winning external impact, which means that it's try or die for the affirmative. Additionally, he's not winning a spillover argument to other commodities, there's no spillover argument to other commodities. Only the turn access to that because disease accesses multiple sectors of the economy, whereas they only have a turn to one. Additionally, they're the uniqueness debate. All their industry-specific arguments are talking about other sectors, which means that our CSM evidence is just better than and more reason that business ventures aren't happening and because people can't get credit is predictive, whereas there's evidence talking about short-term fluctuations. Additionally, our evidence is just more uniqueness for our term, whereas they only win uniqueness to one sector. We win uniqueness to the entire economy, which means we have a better magnitude to send our team evidence. He doesn't really answer it. It says that people will monoculture, which discourages innovation. He doesn't have a warrant to answer that argument. I don't even think he answered it at all. He said the bird flu argument. Our bird flu argument doesn't make sense. Our argument is that in the short term, people will panic and not invest in the economy. They also won't buy food, which means that it doesn't solve their food prices argument. Additionally, we will win that more people will panic about bird flu than will want to invest in it because whereas everyone can get sick, not everyone can make money off of the vaccine. How to go? At the top, we'll solve their standing reserve arguments. A subpoint is that dying is worse than standing reserve. Who cares? If you are standing reserve, if you are dead, at least if you're alive, you have potential for life. Additionally, we get new arguments because they have made new block analysis. Additionally, we solve an instance of standing reserve in factory farms. All of our confinement arguments are internal link turns that are dissets to the alternative net benefits of fermentation. Additionally, all of their securitization arguments are checked by the disease argument. Diseases can be securitized. We're not saying they're humans with predictable motives. Everyone in this round agrees that diseases can be predicted and you know what to do if you fucking get sick. Additionally, we do not concede the alternative. We have two dissets. The point is we have an inevitability argument. They can't solve standing reserve. Our wall and evidence indicates that every instance of releasement is also a simultaneous act of concealment if it's inevitable. If we win any net benefit of fermentation goes away. Additionally, we're winning a singularity disadvantage. Our Zimmerman evidence indicates that we must resist a singular focus, even if that singular focus is ontology, forecloses other possibilities linked to A. So point is their probability they're conceding that science is inevitable, and they use mechanistic focus too, which means that the alternative doesn't solve any of the links. Is conceded, which means that even if they don't go for this link argument, all of their fictionalization arguments go away. It's also a reason why you should give credence to our disease advantages, which are net benefits of permutation dissess. The alternative B subpoint is he is conceding that farming is technological and it's an instance of standing reserve. So even if in other instances we should reject and embrace release, and we shouldn't in this instance because we solve a specific internal link to their impact, which would be inevitable in the world of the alternative. Do not let them get up in the 2 and explain how they solve it, because he doesn't do enough work. He doesn't do enough work in the 1 and R, and basically the process of the alternative solve the case. Additionally, their securitization link is stupid. I really do think there is a distinction here that diseases in the environment do not have predictable motives, and we can use science to predict them, which is also possible in the world of the alternative. So at the very least, the alternative doesn't solve it. I'm not going for the framework of the all vague arguments, but I will go for the permutation argument. There are a couple dissets. First, he makes this security argument about security tied to abstract ideas. He's not grounding this in our evidence, so I'm not really sure where he's getting from, but the fascism argument is pretty stupid. He is conceding that fascism is inevitable, and he's not explaining in the cross-text how in the world of factory farms that isn't fascist, or how the alternative would have a mechanism to deal with that. So I'm pretty sure the dissads to the permutation outweigh any, the dissads to the alternative outweighed by the fucking net benefits of the permutation. I can't talk. Additionally, what else do you want me to say?
Extend the Zimmerman evidence.
Oh, yeah. I've already extended the Zimmerman evidence, but I'll extend it again here. There's a singularity dissad to the permutation, which outweighs all their link arguments in a world where, well, when that it's inevitable, their singularity of focus is worse than our singularity of focus, because at least ours is productive. They are not enumerating any specific advantage other than the standing reserve, and they do not have a scenario in which that's possible, or a scenario in which our affirmative would be co-opted and used by elites to do some fucked up shit, which means that basically you should vote affirmative. Additionally, what else? Least minutes concealment. Do you want me to go for Heidegger's a Nazi?
No, we have to.
Probably kind of stupid.
Oh, you go for Nixon.
Oh, and Watts is a Nazi. Peace. Yeah, I can tell.
That's a pump digger right there. Yeah.
I did not take this on me for a second. I did take Heidegger cards that I didn't read.
We used to have all these cards, so I can take a look at them before you have a timer going. Did somebody got a timer going?
You used a minute.
Okay.
How much do you have?
We had 6 left.
Oh, I'll stop that. You have 45.
Do y'all have the 1 and C links to the K?
Yeah. What?
Our layover record's going to be in Amsterdam.
No
way.
Too bad.
Hopefully 3 days or something.
Yeah, they told us we have all day Thursday. They told us we have all day Thursday, so we got a whole morning. My flight is still booked for Friday morning. I got out of there.
Yeah. We will find you a place. My understanding is you have to come down by minute.
Oh, really?
Whatever Kofi says is law.
Oh, he said, like, I asked him when you have to be out by Thursday, and he said, yeah, we're spent all day, just for requirements.
Whatever Kofi says.
Yeah. I was gonna rebook, but it's not 78 hours.
Well, I think if we find you a place for trash, that's not.
When do you leave?
Friday.
No, I get flight that I have to share. I take my car there.
I couldn't be less cool if I tried.
Did you go for like? Hey, come out. Hey, Nick, can you toss me back my pen?
I'm not going to throw it. I have a policy against debaters throwing things. Overview on the K. The K line behind. Then disease, and then environment. No idea why the 1AR didn't go for some theory. That is how Nick and I always lose. There are three major framing arguments conceded by the 1AR. First is inevitability for both specific advantage. A subpoint is the environment or the conceded order evidence indicates a disorder. And the environment is inevitable, though no matter how much we try to contain and manage control, the environment always succeeds or grasp is not a mechanistic unit that we can frame and control in a specific way. The B subpoint is disease security, and if security is inevitable is like conceded. It means that all your scenarios are inevitable. Our Mitchell evidence is fantastic. One points indicate that when we try and frame the world by means of a plan, it actually says that the plan always demands us to securitize ourselves, means that we frame ourselves, control our own being awesome, means we have a prior commitment about what other life is. This makes sense in terms of their disease management, because it requires that we've already predetermined that diseases and other things are not life. Their evidence makes an ontological commitment itself. The second is that they concede massive impact from it. They indicate that we must be towards death. We must run for it and reject any of their death-based impact from it. Means you do not evaluate any of their impact calculuses. Given it's where conceded argument means that the also conceded ontological real comes first, means you do examine the ontological commitments planned before the material aspects of their specific advantage, means that we show that metaphysics will always attempt to frame itself the more than man for specific arguments, specific articulations, means the more that metaphysics must collapse back in us. So it's our climate and zero metaphysics means when we control the frame of debate line on. They say they solve standard reserve. I do not understand this argument. One, with any risk that there are linked to framing arguments. There are several. Standard link arguments means that they the permutation or nothing else can lead to standard reserve. The first is arbitrary order guilt argument extended in the 1 hour indicates that they always press guilt upon us for our actions. The actions of others means that the ontological commitments the plan makes are always the desire for more action leads to chaos and confusion. This is not an answer. As their indicates that standard reserve is the biggest impacts. One, it leads to internal length ecological destruction. This is conceded. Internal length direction. When we can devalue life, we can also draw lines of devaluation of others, makes all of their environmental damage our arguments inevitable. They say these are new block analysis. I do not understand that was conceded. One, and see argument they do not get this argument should not be allowed. New in the two way are also they say securitized can be better. This argument doesn't make sense to me. They have zero guarded defense of what securitization means. There's zero evidence which certainly not conclude for the affirmative. It may conclude we must take political action in some instances, but does not respond to any of the rank or link arguments we make about why they have feelings for the environment, or that they rely on the Cartesian ego dualism to do what is action and what is not action. These arguments are extended above means that they can't win any risk of offense from the Zimmerman card. We see all of our inevitability arguments, there's no net benefit. Also, they say inevitably that when it's all standard reserve. I don't understand what the internal length of this argument is. Extend R one NC Zimmerman evidence indicates that they only destroys to the self-development action with multiple links toward how they believe the only action that exists in the world is taking political action, but rather that thought itself may arise from action. They say science is inevitable. I do not understand what the impact of this argument is. Not what explaining the one I don't think you should allow Rubiae to have one in the two way, or that this argument only of course science is inevitable, that are the way we gather empirical knowledge from the world is inevitable. However, it is irrelevant when science itself assumes that we can frame the world in a certain way or assume what other beings are based on observable principles, rather than revealing the being must reveal itself to us from a way that does not rely on the notion of empirical knowledge. Not that empirical knowledge is not useful, but rather is not the only that's not the only thing that exists. That is not irrelevant to any of the linkers we're extending, so they can't get off into this. They say to solve the internal length of the impact ramifications. I do not understand what this means. In fact, their drive for specificity is exactly linked to our argument. The drive for metaphysical relations to the others means that the more drive for empirical knowledge we create means that metaphysical framing is inevitable in that world. There's no impact to this argument. So I will also explain what it means. What it means in terms of advantages. When I get they say disease prevents these motives. I already explained what the disease like they still link to the disease arguments well, because they assume that already that things like microbes things are not like things that are so prior ontological commitment to permutation. When they concede that it doesn't link that it separates means that the research rejects permutation may be a cheap shot, but it's conceded argument. Also, the first piece of security DI reference Mitchell evidence here makes us unique. This has the alternative. Also, they're doing analysis in the one area how it could resolve any of our other link arguments. We win the entire framing of the affirmative. Also consider our death links. That means any net benefit they can identify the permutation as a new link, and a reason why you do not evaluate the permutation, because it only exists to protect ourselves from death. But the only way to break the internal logical security is accept that death is inevitable. We have to accept the extinguishment of our being in order to reveal being to ourselves. They say it's a singularity of the permutation. I actually don't know what the fuck that means. There are some or releasement solves a singularity. They remain open to all relevant relation of being. Their evidence assumes that the theory of action we call prior concern. It's like the whole Swatter catch-22 in the midst of all this truth. There is only truth-lying politics. Can only allowing politics to come allows us to solve this argument. Evidence. They make this argument about revealment and concealment. That is an interesting FYI about Heidegger's argument, but only is a reason why you would vote for the alternative, not permutation, because the permutation forecloses the idea of constant questioning, and if they said exchange it for what they believe to be action. There's two many conceded arguments above means there's utopian management argument. They've also considered our Eldon evidence indicates that we make that internal links all their binary arguments indicates we have a reapplied when we have a metaphysical understanding of the structure of the world. That is what specific structures that describes the environment is. That's our diner link evidence means that is a conceded link argument means permutation never solved the disease bench. First time they're imicable on one, the perfect example of why we'll always try to secure ourselves is to protect ourselves from disease. There'll always be diseases out there in the world. Our own CNN evidence indicates that these things are inevitable, just like their environment finish. There's always structures that will see the grasp of our control. The idea of animal contact and that exists in other nations. So it's just a specific example of how we can extend the grasp of our security to include other nations. Will always drive to lead to wars and violence. Well, I meant to do that. I mean, it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. All you, man. I mean, he didn't say anything about it. So as well.
I guess it was a death on. What's the
We should be open to death, so we cannot release ourselves and snake you.
Do you know what time should we eat tonight?
Some shit. We should be open to the possibility of dying. But if not, we can make the shit.
Yeah, I know.
See in the reserve.
Well, yeah, I think we need to take a
Just be
question.
like, I don't care.
yeah, the impact of those things here, right, is it's all violence and also,
Yeah.
What?
so death is all.
Basically.
No, I'm with you on that.
I got something that's fine.
What? Where?
So you're gonna use those to up time?
Today,
No. You want a high five or something?
God, you knew it too.
Oh wow, it's still done.
How much time you got left?
I don't know.
3 minutes.
We're not gonna use it all.
I'm gonna smoke a cigarette.
No, you're not. You're gonna do that after he's done. Because I want a cigarette too, and if I can't have one, you can. Been having behind my ear. Hey Nick,
Yeah.
can we go buy cigarettes after this?
Come on, Rubiae.
Hey, I'm scrapping up the Nick. Or actually, I'm thinking what the rest you said. Okay, oral be BizCom, disease, critique. Very good. The tuner does a fantastic job of explaining why our attempt to manage institutions like disease and the environment is bad. Unfortunately, it doesn't explain why it's a bad thing to manage human-based institutions like the economy. He dropped all of our business confidence arguments. He concedes the argument that business confidence is specifically low regression. Science wide over and says that there's an economic collapse coming. We've conceded his argument from the one in north. This is the fastest scenario for human extinction. I'll answer. The only major thing you could perhaps get from this is a death link, which he did not do the work of making into 2NR. If we straight turn a dis ad, it's probably something they have to answer or explain why they have a link to. Without a clear drawn link in the 2NR, there's a conceded extinction scenario for the affirmative that doesn't link to any of their offense. There's only enough benefit to the permutation. The disease debate, he says that the drive to control all handle this on the critique debate now. Overview at the top, he doesn't give you any framework for how to weigh these links. If you win that the affirmative would solve some instance of the link, then we're already winning a conceded argument for how we'd be able to solve this, we would be able to solve human extinction without any risk of their link arguments. First is how we solve the link. There are two good arguments. The first is we solve their standard reserve arguments against factory farms. So everybody's example of the attempt to manage and control life through the confinement and revealing of beings. He doesn't have any distinction between human and animal suffering, which means that we the only thing it solves is standard reserve. This also serves a permutation argument because the alternative would lead to a form of ontology that rejected factory farms, which is the reason the plan isn't really such a bad thing, where it wouldn't reject factory farms, and only the plan solves this instance of the standard reserve. He also doesn't answer the major one-A argument that would solve an instance of fascism and control of life and being. These types of things also spill over how we treat humans, which is another conceded one-A argument. Now they have conceded two arguments for how they would produce a link, which is especially damning because they give you no way to weigh these things. The first is this: the releasement is concealment debate. Look, this got 5 seconds of airtime in the 1NR, it got 15 seconds of airtime in the 2NR. Neither one of them makes sense. They've considered a role in evidence that says that in order to focus on an ontological subject, or in order to focus on releasement, you must first conceal what being is within the first instances. Subjectification is the same link and the same management of being as producing the alternative. They have absolutely no weight into these arguments. This is a good 2AC argument. It's well explained in the 1AR, and it's being explained well here. They don't have an answer. They've also conceded their science argument that their alternative would functionally manage and respond to disease in the same way as the affirmative, which means that it would produce the same types of management security. The only major link they have is this death argument. Look, the only argument for the only impact of the standing reserve is that it leads to a possibility where all violence can occur. The terminal impact of all these arguments is death. There is no differentiating the impact in the 2NR that functions outside of death, which means that the only thing that would possibly link to our straight turn to the disadvantage or to our other major case arguments would be death. Now, they say at the top of the environment, they say the environment, we've conceded that their form of science would lead to the same forms of regulation, which means that they treat and form the natural environment the same way that the plan does. Their argument for the recorder evidence would have been better if they would have extended their diner link evidence, but he doesn't get to the environment advantage in the 2NR, which means they have no specific link analysis outside of the fact that we management, which is a link that also links mutually to the alternative. He says that disease and insecurity, because we try to secure ourselves. Look, every time he gets a security link, he says, I don't understand what they're saying. I think think our argument is pretty clear. Our argument is that your Zimmerman evidence talks about securing ourselves versus other humans, not securing ourselves versus things which are a part of ourselves. Even if you want to there's a distinction between trying to secure ourselves from outside objects, disease is something that infects the body from within, which is the reason why our link is significantly different than the type of Zimmerman link that you went, because we are not trying to secure ourselves or destroy something else in the process of doing it, which is the internal link to your argument. Now, the argument about similar focus and control, he says he doesn't understand that. That's right, I've explained it above. He says the guilt argument, there is no explanation for how the 1AC produces guilt. There is a pretty good explanation of why guilt would lead to their impact, because there's no explanation. If you have it on your flow for the 1AC produces guilt, I'll give you $5 out of my pocket. He says that the standard reserves leads to ecological destruction, and I've explained this at the top. There's no way to weigh these links versus one another. We have explained several reasons why only the permutation would solve unique instances of standard reserve, the alternative wouldn't. There's no way to weigh these things. We're winning that there are literally thousands upon thousands of human beings who are suffering to being controlled. Even if they were to attempt to control ontology, they don't have a spill over claim that is nearly as large as that within the affirmative. They say that we don't have a defense of securitization. We've explained the dualism in this argument above. He says that action is destruction within himself. Look, we aren't going for our foreclosure arguments or any of our politics arguments, but we are explaining why the permutation is a good example of political action. He doesn't have any explanation for the types of political action taken by the affirmative necessarily lead to destruction, only by ones which attempted to securitize would, which is the distinction we've made above. Now, the permutation is to do with the plan and the alternative. He says that it's severance. Look, debate 101, you have to extend an impact of severance in the 2 in order to win the debate. It's not enough to say it's a conceded argument. If you have a voter attached to this argument, it'll perhaps be important, but he doesn't extend the warrant. We're running the unique that benefits the top as well as our Zimmerman evidence. Our Zimmerman evidence says that it's bad to treat all beings as similar, that it's bad to begin an ontological focus that forecloses certain things, i.e. the possibility of foreclosing science or other forms of human knowledge, because this foreclosure necessarily rests upon the idea that those things cannot be a part of an ontology. Argument that this foreclosure is the same one that they say is produced by the affirmative. Since they did not give a framework for weighing these links, it's incredibly difficult to weigh them against one another. He's also conceded all of the 1 AR's weighting arguments. He's also conceded all the 1 AR's weighting arguments. There would literally be massive human extinction in the same way that it's produced by a standing reserve, except that would enlarge and kill all of humanity. He doesn't have any reason why this would be bad outside of his death link. There's no difference between the death link he extrapolates to the affirmative and the death link which is extrapolated by standing reserves. He says that it's a way to evaluate the permutation. Look, if this is the best link argument, he has to do a little bit more here. How is the impact of the critique any different than the type of death produced by the affirmative? These are necessary questions that have to be answered in the 2 and R before you can vote for him. He says that there's singularity. He says that the alternative would be able to solve the singularity DA. Look, even you're using, he says the releasement would be able to solve the singularity DA. You have to answer the releasement argument that we read before you can win that your alternative will be able to solve it. You have conceded that it relies on the same form of singularity, because even if you attempt to embark upon an ontological journey, you still form ontology around the idea that there's a single subject which must investigate being, which is uniquely bad, and it's an argument you don't have an answer to. Our Zimmerman evidence also makes a distinction, because your form of releasement is one that relies upon one notion of subjectivity, i.e. our form of release will begin from something that is natural and non-scientific. Argument is that this necessarily forecloses types of knowledges which would be productive. A good example of that is the 1AC. Don't know what else to say, Lauren. Good job.
I don't know what to say.
We both ended our speeches like, hey, what do